Welcome to Wicked Shizuku's Reviews, bringing you a southern perspective on books, movies, music, and much, much more. Stick around for a while, you just might hear something wicked. Hello friends, welcome to episode 13 of Wicked Shizuku's Reviews, and thank you for joining me again. So, I hope you've been enjoying up until now, and we shall be covering the topic of charity today in the Bible Promise book. Blessed is he that considereth the poor. The Lord will deliver him in time of trouble. The Lord will preserve him and keep him alive, and he shall be blessed upon the earth. And thou wilt not deliver him unto the will of his enemies. Psalms 41, 1 and 2. He hath pity upon the poor, lendeth unto the Lord, and that which he hath given will he pay him again? Proverbs 19:17. But when thou makest a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and thou shalt be blessed, for they cannot recompense thee, for thou shalt be recompensed at the resurrection of the just. Luke 14:13 and 14. Sell what ye have, and give alms. Provide yourself bags which wax not old, a treasure in the heavens that faileth not, where no thief approacheth, neither moth corrupteth. Luke 12:33. He that despiseth his neighbor sinneth, but he hath mercy on the poor, happy is he. Proverbs 14:21. Cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days. Ecclesiastes 11:1. He hath dispersed, he hath given to the poor. His righteousness endureth forever. His horn shall be exalted with honor. Psalms 112:9. He that hath a bountiful eye shall be blessed, for he giveth of his bread to the poor. Proverbs 22:9. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, and shaken together, and running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that ye met withal, it shall be measured to you again. Luke 6:38. He that giveth unto poor shall not lack, but he that hideth his eyes shall have many a curse. Proverbs 28:27. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. 2 Corinthians 9:7. There is that scattereth, and yet increaseth, and there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. The liberal soul shall be made fat, and he that watereth shall be watered also himself. Proverbs 11:24-25. I have been young, and now am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. He is ever merciful and lendeth, and his seed is blessed. Psalms 37:25-26. And if thou draw out thy soul to the hungry, and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall thy light rise in obscurity, and thy darkness be as the noonday. Isaiah 58:10. Charge them that are rich in this world, that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy, that they do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willing to communicate. 1 Timothy 6:17-18. It is not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house. When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh. Then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go before thee. The glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. Isaiah 58:7-8. And the Levite, because he hath no part nor inheritance with thee, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hand which thou doest. Deuteronomy 14:29. Then Jesus, beholding him, loved him, and said unto him, One thing thou lackest. Go thy way, sell whatsoever thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven. And come take up the cross and follow me. Mark 10:21. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them, otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, that they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what the right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. Matthew 6:1-4. Then the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee an hungered, and fed thee, or thirsty, and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger, and took thee in, or naked, and clothed thee? Or when we saw thee sick, or in prison, and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Matthew 25:34-40. And that was the topic of charity in the Bible Book of Promises, or the Bible Promise Book. and I will be right back after this break. See you on the other side. All right, and welcome back. So, if you recall, in episode 8, we left off in the middle of book 2 of the Aeneid. And I'm going to pick up that now, and we shall see what came of the fall of Troy. Meanwhile, the city is all confusion and sorrow. My father and Caius's house, remote and sheltered among its trees, was not so far away, but I could hear the noises, always clearer, the thickening din of war. Breaking from sleep, I climbed to the rooftop, listening. Listening and straining, the way a shepherd does on the top of a mountain when fire goes over the corn and the winds are roaring, or the rush of a mountain torrent drowns the fields and the happy crops and the work of men and oxen, and even drags great trees over. And then I knew the truth indeed. The craft of the Greeks was hidden no longer from my sight. The house of a neighbor, Dephobus, went up in flames next door. Usaligan was burning. Sigum's water gave back the glow. Men shouted, and the trumpets blared loud. I grabbed my arms with little purpose. There was no sense in it, but my heart was burning to mass a band for war. Rushed to the hilltop with my comrades at my side. Anger and frenzy hurry me on. A decent death in battle is a helpful thought sometimes. And here came Pantheus, running from the weapons, priest of Apollo and son of Orpheus. With holy relics in his hands and dragging his little grandson, here came Pantheus running in madness to my door. How goes it, Pantheus? What strongholds still is ours? I had hardly spoken when he began with a groan. It has come, this day will be our last, and we cannot escape it. Trojans, we have been, Troy has been, and glory is ours no more. Fierce Jupiter has taken everything off to Argos, and the Greeks lord it in a town on fire. The horse, high in the city, pours out armed men, and Sinon, arrogant victor, lights up more fires. The gates are standing open, and men are there by the thousands, ever as many as come once to my Mycenae. Others block the narrow streets with weapons drawn. The blades flash in the dark. The point is set for murder. A few of the guards are trying, striking blindly for all the good it does. His words, or the god's purpose, swept me on toward the fire and arms, where the grim furies call, and the clamor and confusion reaching heaven. Rapheus joined me. Epictetus, mighty in arms, came to my side in the moonlight. Hypanis, Dymas, and young Corobus, Magdan's son, poor youngster, mad with a hopeless passion for Cassandra. He wanted to help Priam, but never heeded the warnings of his loved one. As they ranged themselves for battle, eager, I addressed them. O brave young hearts, it will do no good no matter. Even if your will is fixed to follow a leader taking the final risk, you can't help seeing the fortune of our state. The gods have gone. They have left their shrines and altars, and the power they once upheld is fallen. You are helping a town already burnt. So let us die. Rush into arms. One safety for the vanquished is to have hope of none. They were young and angry, like wolves, marauders in black mist, whom hunger drives blindly on, whose whelps abandoned wait for them dry-jawed. So we went on, through foes, through weapons, to certain death. We made for the heart of the city, black night around us with its hollow shadow. Who could explain that night's destruction, equal its agony with tears? The ancient city, a power for many years, comes down, and corpses lie littering the streets and homes and altars. Not only Trojans die, the old-time valor returns to the vanquished heart, and the Greek victors know what it is to fall. Everywhere sorrow, everywhere panic, everywhere the image of death made manifold. Out of a crowd of Greeks comes one Androgeus, thinking us allies, hailing us as friendly. Why, men, where have you been? You dawdling fellows, hurry along. There is plunder for the taking. Others are busy at it, and you just coming from the high ships. And then he knew he had blundered. He had fallen in with foes who gave no answer. He stopped, stepped back, like a man who treads on a serpent, unseen in the rough brush, and then, in panic, draws back as the purple neck swells out in anger. Even so, Androgeus pulled away in terror. We rush them, swarm all over them. They are frightened. They do not know their ground. And fortunate favors our first endeavor. Coroebus, a little crazy with nerve and luck, cries out, "Comrades!" Where fortune first shows the way and sides with us, we follow. Let us change our shields, put on the Grecian symbols. All's fair and more. We lick them, or we trick them. And what's the odds? He takes Androgeus' helmet, whose plume streams over his head, takes up the shield with proud device, and fits the sword to his side. And Ripheus does the same, and so does Dymas, and all the others happily being armed. With spoil new won, we join the Greeks, all going under no gods of ours. In the night's darkness, wade into the many a flight, and Greeks by the dozens we send to hell, and some of them in panic speed to the ships. They know that the shore, and trust it. And some of them, these were the abject cowards, climb scrambling up the horses' sides again, take refuge in the womb. It is not for men to trust unwilling gods. Cassandra was being dragged from Pallas's temple, her hair loosed to the wind, her eyes turned upward to heaven for mercy. They had bound her hands. Coroebus could not bear that sight. In madness, he threw himself upon them, and he died. We followed, all of us, into the thick of it, and were cut down, not only by Greeks. The rooftops, held by our friends, rained weapons. We were wearing Greek crests and armor, and they did not know us. And the Greeks came on, shouting with anger, burning to foil that rescue. There was Menelaus and Agamemnon and the savage Ajax, and a whole army of them. Hurricanes rage the same way when winds from different quarters clash in the sky, and the forest groans, and Neptune storms underneath the ocean. Those we rooted once in the dark came back again from the byways and alleys of the town. They mark our shields, our lying weapons, and our foreign voices. Of course, we are outnumbered. Peneleus, it was, who slew Coroebus at the altar sacred to Pallas. Ripheus fell, a man most just of all the Trojans, most fair-minded. The gods thought otherwise. Hypanis, Dymas were slain by their own men, and Pantheus' goodness was no protection nor his priestly office. I call to witness Troy, her fires, her ashes, and the last agonies of all our people, that in that hour I ran from no encounter with any Greek. And if the fates had been for me to fall in battle, there I earned it. The current swept me off with two companions, one a fetus, too slow with age, the other Pelias, limping from Ulysses's wound. The noise kept calling us to Priam's palace. There might have been no fighting and no dying. Through all the city, such a battle raged, here from the ground to the rooftop. At the threshold, waves of assault were breaking, and the Greeks were climbing rung by rung along the ladders, using one hand, the right one up and forward over the battlements, and the left one thrust in the protecting shield, and over their heads the Trojans pried up towers and planking wrecking the building. Gilded beams, the spoils of their fathers, were ample weapons for the final moment. Some had the doorways blocked, others behind them were ready with drawn swords. We had a moment when help seemed possible. New reinforcement might yet relieve the palace. There was a secret entrance there, a passage all the way through the building, a postern gate, where while the kingdom stood, Andromache would go alone or bring the little boy Astyanax to Hector's father and mother. I climbed to the top of the roof, where the poor Trojans were hurling down their unavailing darts. The tower stood on the very edge, a lookout over all Troy, the ships and camp of the Greeks. This we attacked with steel, where the joints were weakest, and pried it up and shoved it over. It crashed, a noisy ruin, over the hostile columns. But more kept coming up. The shower of stones and darts continued raining. Before the entrance, at the very threshold, stood Pyrrhus, flashing proudly in bronze light, sleek as serpent coming into the open, fed on rank herbs, wintering under the ground. The old sloth cast, the new skin shining, rolling, his slippery length, reaching his neck to the sun, while the forked tongue darts from his mouth. Automedon was with him. Pyrrhus, Achilles' driver, a giant of a man, and the host from Syros, or Syros, all closing in on the palace and hurling flames among the foremost. Pyrrhus, swinging an axe, burst through, wrenched the bronze doors out of their hinges, smashed through the paneling, turned it into a window. The long halls came into view, the inner chambers, Priam and the older kings they see, armed warriors at the threshold. Within, it was all confusion, women wailing, pitiful noise, groaning, and the blows. The din reaches the golden stars. The trembling mothers wander, not knowing where or find a spot to cling to. They would hold and kiss the doors. Pyrrhus comes on, aggressive as his father. No barrier holds him back. The gate is battered as the ram smashes at it. The doors come down. Force finds a way. The Greeks pour in. They slaughter the first ones in their path. They fill in the courtyard with soldiery wilder than any river, and flood over the banks and dikes and plowland. I saw them. Pyrrhus going mad with murder, and Atreus' twin sons, and Hecuba. I saw all her daughters, and poor old Priam, his blood polluting the altars he had hallowed. The 50 marriage chambers, the proud hope of an everlasting line, are violated. The doors within, with the golden spoil, are turned to splinters. Whatever the fire has spared the Greeks take over. You would ask, perhaps, about the fate of Priam. When he saw the city fall, and the doors of the palace ripped from the hinge, and the enemy pouring in, old as he was, he went and found his armor, unused so many years, and his old shoulders shook as he put it on. He took his sword, a useless weapon, and doomed to die, went rushing in to the midst of the foe. There was an altar in the open courtyard, shaded by a laurel, whose shadow darkened the household gods, and here Hecuba and her daughters had come thronging. Like doves by the black storm driven, they were praying here at the altar and clinging to the gods. Whatever image was left, and the queen saw Priam in the arms of his youth. "Oh, my unhappy husband," she cried, "have you gone mad to dress yourself for battle so? It is all no use. The time needs better help than yours. Not even my Hector could help us now. Come to me, come to the altar. It will protect us, or at least will let us die altogether." She drew him to her. Just then, through darts, through weapons, came Pelides, the son of Priam, fleeing deadly Pyrrhus. Down the long colonnades and empty hallways, wounded, and Pyrrhus after him, vicious, eager for the last spear thrust, and he drives it home. Pelides falls, and his life goes out with his blood, father and mother watching, and then Priam, in the very grip of death, cries out in anger. If there is any righteousness in heaven to care about such wickedness, the gods will have a right reward and thanks to offer a man like this, who has made a father witness the murder of his son, the worst pollution. You claim to be Achilles' son, you liar. Achilles had some reverence, respected a supplement's right, and trust. He gave me back my Hector's lifeless body for the tomb, and let me go to my kingdom. With the word he flung a feeble spear, which dropped, deflected from the rough bronze. It had hung there for a moment, and Pyrrhus sneered. "So go and tell my father the latest news. Do not forget to mention, old messenger boy, my villainous behavior, and what a bastard Pyrrhus is. Now die." He dragged the old man trembling to the altar, slipping in his son's blood. He grabbed his hair with his left hand, and right drove home the sword deep in the side to the hilt, and so fell Priam, who had seen Troy burn her walls and come down once more. Proud ruler over the peoples and lands of Asia, he lies a nameless body on the shore, dismembered, huge, the head torn from the shoulders. Grim horror then came home to me. I saw my father when I saw the king, the life going out with the cruel wound. I saw Creusa forsaken, my abandoned home, Ilias, my little son. I looked around. They all had gone, exhausted, flung down from the walls, or dead in the fire, and I was left alone. And I saw Helen hiding, of all places, at Vesta's shrine, and clinging there in silence. But the bright flames lit the scene. That hated woman, fearing both Trojan anger and Greek vengeance, a common fury to both lands, was crouching beside the altar. Anger flared up in me. For punishment and vengeance, should she then, I thought, come home to Sparta safe, uninjured. walk through Mycenae, a triumphant queen. See husband, home, parents, and children tended by Trojan slave girls. This with Priam fallen, and Troy burnt down, and the shore soaked in blood. Never, no honorable name I knew was won by punishing women. Yet for me, there might be praise for just abolition of this unholiness and satisfaction in vengeance for the ashes of my people. All this I may have said aloud in frenzy as I rushed on, when to my sight there came a vision of my lovely mother, radiant in the dark night, a goddess manifest, as tall and fair as when she walks in heaven. She caught me by the hand and stopped me. Son, what sorrow rouses this relentless anger, this violence? Do you care for me no longer? Consider others first. Your aged father, Anchias. Is your wife, Cerusa, living? Where is Ilias? Greeks are all around them. Only my love between them and fire and sword. It is not for you to blame this Spartan woman, daughter of Tyndareus, or even Paris. The gods are the ones, the high gods are relentless. It is they who bring this power down, who topple Troy from the high foundation. Look, your vision is mortal dull. I will take the cloud away. Fear not a mother's counsel. Where you see rock torn from rock, and smoke and dust and in billows, Neptune is working, plying the trident, prying the walls from their foundations, and see Juno, fierce of all, holding the Scaean gates, girt with steel, and calling from the ships, implacable companions on the towers. Turn and be certain. Pallas takes command, gleaming with Gorgon and Stormcloud. Even Jove, our father, nerves the Greeks, fire and spirit, and spurs the other gods against the Trojans. Hasten the flight, my son. No other labor waits for accomplishment. I promise safety until you reach your father's house. She had spoken and vanished in the thickening night of shadows. Dread shapes come into vision, mighty powers, great gods at war with Troy, which so it seemed was sinking as I watched, with the same feeling as when on mountain tops you see the loggers hacking an ash tree down, and it always threatens to topple, nodding a little, and the leaves trembling when no wind stirs, and dies of its wounds with one long, loud last groan, and dirt from the ridges heaves up as it goes down with roots in air. Divinity, my guide, I leave the rooftop. I pass unharmed through the enemies, and blazing weapons give place to me, and flames retire. At last I reached the house. I found my father, the first one that I looked for. I meant to take him to the safety of the hills, but he was stubborn, refusing longer life or barren exile. Since Troy was dead, you have the strength, he told me. You are young enough to take flight. For me, had heaven wanted to save my life, they would have spared this home for me. We have seen enough destruction, more than enough, survived a captured city. Speak to me as a corpse laid out for burial. A quick farewell and go. Death I shall find with my own hand, and the enemy will pity or look for spoil. The loss of burial is nothing at all. I have been living too long, hated by gods and useless since the time Jove blasted me with lightning, wind, and fire. He would not move, however we wept. Sirusa, Ascanthius, all the house insistent, pleading that he should not bring all to ruin with him. He would not move. He would not listen. Again I rushed to arms. I prayed for death. What else was left to me? Dear father, were you thinking I could abandon you and go? What son could bear a thought so monstrous? If the gods want nothing to be left of so great a city, if you are bound or pleased to add us all to the wreck of Troy, the way it is open for it. Pyrrhus will soon be here. From the blood of Priam he comes. He slays the son before the father. The sire at the altar stone. Oh, my dear mother, was it for this you saved me, brought me through the fire and sword to see our enemies here in the very house, and wife and son and father murdered in each other's blood? Bring me my arms. The last light calls the conquered. Let me go back to the Greeks. Renew the battle. We shall not all of us die unavenged. Sword at my side. I was on the point of going, working the left arm into the shield. Sirusa clung to me on the threshold, held my feet, and made me see my little son. Dear husband, if you are bent on dying, take us with you. But if you think there is any hope in fighting, and you should know, stay and defend the house, to whom we are abandoned, your father and son and I once called your wife. She filled the house with a moaning outcry, and then something happened. A wonderful portent over Aeolus's head. Between our hands and faces there appeared a blaze of gentle light. A tongue of flame, harmless and innocent, was playing over the softness of his hair, around his temples. We were afraid. We did our best to quench it with our own hands, our water. But my father raised joyous eyes to heaven and prayed aloud, Almighty Jupiter, if any prayer of ours has power to move you, look upon us. Grant only this. If we have ever deserved it, grant us a sign and ratify the omen. He had hardly spoken when thunder on the left resounded, and a shooting star from heaven drew a long tail of light across the shadows. We saw it cross above the house and vanish. In the woods of Ida, a wake of gleaming light where it had sped, and a trail of sulphurous odor. This was a victory. My father rose in worship of the gods and the holy star, crying, I follow, son, wherever you lead. There is no delay, not now. Gods of my fathers, preserve my house and my grandson, yours, the omen, and Troy is in your keeping. Oh, my son, I yield. I am ready to follow, but the fire came louder over the walls. The flames rolled nearer. Their burning tide climbed to my shoulders, father. It will be no burden. So we are together, meeting a common danger or salvation. Aeolus, take my hand. Sirusa, follow. A little way behind, listen, your servants. You will find, when you leave the city, an old temple that once belonged to Ceres. It has been tended for many years with the worship of our fathers. There's a little hill there, and a cypress tree, and that's where we shall meet, one way or another. And one thing more. You, father, are to carry the holy objects and the gods of the household. My hands are foul with battle and blood. I could not touch them without pollution. I bent down and took over my neck and shoulders, spread the cover of the tawny lion skin, took up my burden. Little Aeolus held my hand and trotted, as best he could, beside me. Creusa followed. We went on through the shadows. I had been so brave, so I thought before, in the rain of weapons, in the cloud of massing Greeks, but now I trembled at every breath of air, shook at a whisper, fearful for both my burden and companion. I was near the gates and thinking we had made it, but there was a sound, the tramp of marching feet, and many of them, it seemed. My father, peering through the thick gloom, cried out, "Son, they are coming! Flee, flee! I see their shields, their gleaming bronze." Something or other took my senses from me. In that confusion, I turned aside from the path. I do not know what happened then. Creusa was lost. She had missed the road or halted, weary, for a brief rest. I do not know what happened. She was not seen again. I had not looked back, nor even thought about her till we came to Ceres's hallowed home. The count was perfect. Only one missing there, the wife and mother. Whom I did not accuse of gods and mortals then in my frenzy. What worse thing had happened in the city overthrown? I left Anchias, my son, my household gods, to my companions, in a hiding place in the valley, and I went back into the city again, wearing my armor, ready still one more time for any danger. I found the walls again, the gates dark portals. I followed my own footsteps back, but terror, and silence were all I found. I went on to my house. She might have gone there. Only the Greeks were there, and fire devouring the very pinnacles. I tried Priam's palace. In the empty courtyards, Phoenix and Ulysses guarded the spoils piled up at Juno's altar. They had Trojan treasure there, loot from the altars, great drinking bowls of gold, and stolen garments, and human beings. A line of boys and women stood trembling there. I took the risk of crying through the shadows over and over, "Creusa!" I kept calling, "Creusa!" and "Creusa!" but no answer. No sense, no limit to my aimless rushing all through the town, and then at last I saw her, or thought I did, her shadow, a little taller than I remembered, and she spoke to me beside myself with terror. "Oh, dear husband, what good is all this frantic grief? The gods have willed it so. Creusa may not join you out of this city. Jupiter denies it. Long exile lies ahead, and vast sea reaches. The ships must furrow till you come to land far in the west. Rich fields are there, and a river flowing with gentle current. Its name is Tiber, and happy days await you there. A kingdom, a royal wife. Banish the tears of sorrow over Creusa lost. I shall never see the arrogant houses of the Myrmidons, nor be a slave to any Grecian woman. I am a Dardan woman. I am the wife of Venus's son. It is Sibyl who keeps me here on these shores. And now farewell, and love our son." I wept. There was more to say. She left me, vanishing into the empty air. 3 times I reached out toward her, and 3 times her image fled like the breath of a wind, or of a dream on wings. The night was over. I went back to my comrades. I was surprised to find so many more had joined us, ready for exile. Pitiful people, mothers and men and children, streaming in from everywhere, looking for me to lead them wherever I would. Over the hills of Ida, the morning star was rising in the town, and the Danons held the gate, and help was hopeless. I gave it up. I lifted my father, and together we sought the hills. That is the end of book 2. starting to get really, really tragic, isn't it? But most war is tragic. And there are so many people always lost to every war. And war is senseless. Even in Virgil's time. So, I'm going to take a short break, and I shall be right back. See you on the other side. Okay. And I am back, and we are going to continue on with Songs of Doom by Hunter S. Thompson. And last time we left off, he had broken into a library in order to read, and he ran into the janitor named Andrew. So that's where we left off with Hunter S. Thompson, and viewer discretion is advised in this segment. Electricity. They laughed at Thomas Edison. It has been raining a lot recently. Quick thunderstorms and flash floods. Lightning at night and fear in the afternoon. People are worried about electricity. Nobody feels safe. Fires burst out on dry hillsides, raging out of control, while dope fiends dance in the rancid smoke and animals gnaw each other. Foreigners are everywhere, carrying pistols and bags of money. There are rumors about murder and treachery and women with no pulse. Crime is rampant, and even children are losing their will to live. The phones go dead, and power lines collapse. Whole families plunged into darkness with no warning at all. People who used to be in charge walk around wall-eyed, and with their hair standing straight up on end, looking like they work for Don King, and babbling distractedly about their hearts, humming like stun guns and trying to leap out of their bodies like animals trapped in bags. People get very conscious of electricity when it goes sideways and starts to act erratic. Eerie blackouts, hissing, and strange shocks from the toilet bowl, terrifying power surges, and make light bulbs explode and fry computer circuits that are not even plugged in. The air crackles around your head, and you take every jolt every time you touch yourself. Your lawyer burns all the hair off of his body when he picks up the cordless phone to dial 911. Nobody can handle electricity gone amok. It is too powerful. Ben Franklin was never able to lock a door again after the day the lightning came down to his kite string that fused that key to his thumb. They called it a great discovery, and they called him a great scientist, but in fact, he bawled like a baby for the rest of his life every time he smelled rain in the air. I find myself jerking instinctively into the classic self-defense stance of a professional wire wizard every time I hear the rain on the roof. That is an atavistic tick that I picked up many years ago in my all-night advanced intelligence electronics class at Scott AFB on the outskirts of East St. Louis, where I also learned about pawn shops, oscillators, and full-bore lying as a natural way of life. The stance was the first thing we learned, and we learned it again every day for a long, crazy year. It is as basic to working with serious electricity as holding your breath as is to working underwater. Lock one hand behind your back before you touch anything full of dissatisfied voltage. Even a failed light bulb, because you will almost certainly die soon if you don't. Electricity is neutral. It doesn't want to kill you, but it will if you give it a chance. Electricity wants to go home, and to find a quick way to get there, and it will. Electricity is always homesick. It is lonely, but it is also lazy. It is like a hillbilly with a shotgun and a jug of whiskey gone mad for the revenge on some enemy, a fatal attraction for sure, but he won't go much out of his way to chase the bugger down if ambush looks a lot easier. Why prowl around and make a spectacle of yourself when you can lay in wait under some darkened bridge and swill whiskey like a troll full of hate until your victim appears, drunk and careless and right on schedule, so close that you almost feel embarrassed about pulling the trigger? That is how electricity likes to work. It has no feelings except loneliness, laziness, and a hatred of anything that acts like resistance. Like a wharf rat with its back to the wall, it won't fight unless it has to, but then it will fight to the death. Electricity is the same way. It will kill anything that gets in its way once it thinks it sees a way to get home quick. Zap. Right straight up your finger and through to your heart, in your chest cavity, and down the other side. Anything that gives it an escape route, anything, iron, wire, water, flesh, ganglia, that will take it where it must go, with the efficiency of gravity, or of imperative of salmon swimming upriver, and it wants the shortest route, which is not around a corner and through a muscle mass, in which the middle of your back, but it will go that way if it has to. Some people had to have their loose hands strapped behind them in a hammerlock with rubber cords just to keep their hearts from exploding and their neck nerves from being fried like long blonde hairs in a meat fire when the voltage went through. But sooner or later they learned. We all did, one way or another. One night, perhaps, out of boredom or some restless angst about the fate of Carol Chessman or maybe Kristen Keeler, I connected a 50,000-volt RF transformer to one end of the thin aluminum strap on the Formica workbench that ran around the three sides of the big classroom, and I then grounded the strap to a deep-set screw in a wall socket. Severe shocks resulted when the generator jumped its limiter and began cranking out massive volts and surges of RF voltage. A 50,000-volt shock ran through my stomach, just below my navel, burning a long, thin hole, and I can still pull a string of dental floss through on wet nights. It was horrible, and still is, but it was also a massive breakthrough, and I will never forget the warped joy that I felt when I felt the first surge of electricity went through them. They squawked at each other and flapped their arms like chickens. My own pain was nothing compared to the elation of knowing that I had just made an unspeakably powerful new friend, an invisible weapon that could turn warriors and wizards into newts and cause them to weep. And that was the little section that Andrew had written, and he had read to Dr. Thompson in Song of the Doomed. And we shall continue with what's going on with Dr. Thompson and Andrew next time we come around to it. So, next, I will be taking another short break, and then we will continue on with English literature. Catch you on the other side. All right, and welcome back. So, we are continuing on with the Middle Ages of the Norton Anthology. And this illustration is of the Pilgrims leaving Canterbury, circa 1420. For more information about this image, see the color insert in this volume. So we'll eventually get to that. For some quick reference, this is what our anthology looks like. It is the 10th edition. Okay. The Middle Ages to circa 1485. 43 circa 420. Roman invasion and occupation of Britain. ca 450. Anglo-Saxon conquest. 597. St. Augustine arrives in Kent, beginning of the Anglo-Saxon conversion to Christianity. Reign of King Alfred, 871 to 899. 1066, Norman conquest. 1154 to 1189, the reign of Henry II, ca. 1200. Beginning of Middle English literature. 1360 to 1400, Geoffrey Chaucer. Piers Plowman, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. 1485, William Caxton's printing of Sir Thomas Malory's Morte d'Arthur, one of the first books printed in England. So those are the years that we go through in the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages designates the time span roughly from the collapse of the Roman Empire to the Renaissance and Reformation. The adjective medieval, coined from Latin medium, middle, and avium, age, refers to whatever was made, written, or thought during the Middle Ages. The Renaissance was so named by 19th century historians and critics because they associated it with an outburst of creativity attributed to a rebirth or revival of Latin and especially of Greek learning and literature. The word Reformation designates the powerful religious movement that began in the early 16th century and repudiated the supreme authority of the Roman Catholic Church. The Renaissance was seen as spreading from Italy in the 14th and 15th centuries to the rest of Europe, whereas the Reformation began in Germany and quickly affected all of Europe to a greater or lesser degree. The very idea of a Renaissance or rebirth, however, implies something dormant or lacking in the preceding era. More recently, there have been two non-exclusive tendencies in our understanding of the medieval period and what follows. Some scholars emphasize the continuities between the Middle Ages and the later time now often called the early modern period. Others emphasize the ways in which 16th century writers in some sense created the Middle Ages in order to highlight what they saw as the brilliance of their own time. Medieval authors, of course, did not think of themselves as living in the middle. They sometimes expressed the idea that the world was growing old and that theirs was a declining age, close to the end of time. Yet art literature, and science flourished in the Middle Ages, rooted in both Christian and secular cultures that preserved, transmitted, and transformed classical tradition. The works covered in this section of the anthology encompass a period of more than 800 years, from Cadamon's hymns at the end of the 7th century to Everyman at the beginning of the 16th. The date 1485, the year of accession of Henry VII, and the beginning of the Tudor dynasty, is an arbitrary but convenient one to mark the end of the Middle Ages in England. Although the Roman Catholic Church provided continuity from the 7th century on, the period was one of enormous historical, social, and linguistic change. To emphasize these changes and events underlying them, we have divided the period into 3 primary sections: Anglo-Saxon literature, Anglo-Norman literature, and Middle English literature in the 14th and 15th centuries. The Anglo-Saxon invaders, who began their conquest of the southeastern part of Britain around 450, spoke an early form of the language we now call Old English. Old English displays its kinship with another Germanic languages, German or Dutch, for example, much more clearly than does contemporary British and American English, of which Old English is the ancestor. As late as the 10th century, part of an old Saxon poem written on the continent was transcribed and transliterated into the West Saxon dialect of the Old English without presenting problems to its English readers. In form and content, Old English literature also has much in common with other Germanic literatures with which it shared a body of heroic as well as Christian stories. The major characters in Beowulf are pagan Danes and Geats, and the only connection to England is an obscure allusion to the ancestor of one of the kings of the Angles. The changes already in progress in language and culture of Anglo-Saxon England were greatly accelerated by the Norman conquest of 1066. The ancestry of a French-speaking ruling class had the effect of adding a vast number of French loan words to the English vocabulary. The conquest resulted in new forms of political organization and administration, architecture, and literary expression. In the 12th century, through the interest of Anglo-Normans in British history before the Anglo-Saxon conquest, not only England, but all of Western Europe became fascinated with a legendary hero named Arthur, who makes his earliest appearance in Celtic literature. King Arthur and his knights became a staple subject of medieval French, English, and German literature. Selections from Latin, French, and Old Irish, as well as from Middle English, early Middle English, have been included here to give a sense of the cross-currents of languages and literatures in Anglo-Norman England, and to provide background for later English literature in all periods. Literature in English was both performed orally and written throughout the Middle Ages, but an awareness of and pride in a uniquely English literature did not actually exist before the late 14th century. In 1336, Edward III began a war to enforce his claims to the throne of France. The war continued intermittently for more than 100 years until finally the English were driven from all of the French territories except for the port of Calais in 1453. One result of the war and these losses was a keener sense on the part of England's nobility and of their English heritage and identity. Toward the close of the 14th century, English finally began to displace French as the language for conducting business in Parliament and much of official correspondence. Although the high nobility continued to speak French by preference, they were certainly bilingual, whereas some of the earlier Norman kings had known no English at all. It was becoming possible to obtain patronage for literary achievement in English. The decision of Chaucer, circa 1340 to 1400, to emulate French and Italian poetry in his own vernacular is an indication of the change taking place in the status of English. And Chaucer's works were greatly to enhance the prestige of English as a vehicle for literature of high ambition. He was acclaimed by the 15th century poets as the embellisher of the English tongue. Later writers called him the English Homer and the father of English poetry. His friend, John Gower, circa 1330 to 1408, wrote long poems in French and Latin before producing his last major work, the Confessio Amantis, the Lover's Confession, which, in spite of its Latin title, is composed in English. The third and longest of the three primary sections, Middle English literature in the 14th and 15th centuries, is thus not only chronological and linguistic division, but implies a new sense of English as a literary medium that could compete with French and Latin in elegance and seriousness. Book production throughout the medieval period was an expensive process until the invention of the movable type, and in the mid-15th century introduced into England by Claxton in 1476. Medieval books were reproduced by hand in manuscript, literally written by hand. While paper became increasingly common, for less expensive manuscripts in the 15th century, manuscripts were until then written on carefully prepared animal, usually calf or sheepskin, known as parchment or vellum. More expensive books could be illuminated by both colored and calligraphic lettering and by visual images. The institutions of book production developed across the period. In the Anglo-Saxon period, monasteries were the centers of book production and storage until their dissolution in the 1530s. Monastic and other religious houses continued to produce books. But from the early 14th century, particularly in London, commercial bookmaking enterprises came into being. These were loose organizations of various artisans such as parchment makers, scribes, flourishers, illuminators, and binders, who usually lived in the same neighborhoods in towns. A bookseller or dealer, usually a member of one of these trades, would coordinate the production of books to order for wealthy patrons, sometimes distributing the work of copying to different scribes who would be possible for different gatherings or choirs or queries of the same book. Such shops could call upon the service of professional scribes working in the bureaucracies of the royal court. The market for books also changed across the period, while monasteries, other religious houses, and royal courts continued to fund the production of books. From the Anglo-Norman period, books were also produced for and sometimes by noble and gentry households. From the 14th century, the market was widened yet further, with wealthy urban patrons also ordering books. Some of these books were dedicated to single works, some largely to single genres. Most were much more miscellaneous, containing texts of many kinds, and particularly in the Anglo-Norman period, written in different languages, especially Latin, French, and English. Only a small proportion of medieval books survive. Large numbers were destroyed at the time of the dissolution of the monasteries in 1530s. Texts in Old English, early Middle English, the more difficult texts in later Middle English, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Piers Plowman, and those in other languages are here given in translation. Chaucer and other Middle English works may be read in the original, even by the beginner, with the help of marginal glosses and notes. These texts have been spelled in a way that is intended to aid the reader. Analyses of the sounds and grammar of the Middle English and of Old and Middle English prosody are presented on pages 20 through 26. I see. Okay. So that explains like the scheme, the rhyme schemes and whatnot that they have, and the breakdown, which we will get into in a few episodes eventually. So I was going to read you something very quickly that was either I think I was going to do something pretty short for you after this. Okay, it seems like a fun little read right there. Okay. This is the early Irish lyrics section. Monastic Irish scribes were also composers of beautiful lyrics, inspired by both the study and what could be seen from the study. The Scholar and His Cat. I and White Pangor practice each of us his special art. His mind is set on hunting, my mind on my special craft. I love, it is better than all fame, be quiet besides my book. Diligently pursuing knowledge, White Pangor does not envy me. He loves his childish craft. When the two of us, this tale never wearies us, are alone together in our house, we have something to which we may apply our skill in endless sport. It is usual at times for a mouse to stick in his net. As a result of warlike battling, for my part, into my net falls some difficult rule of hard meaning. He directs his bright, perfect eye against an enclosing wall. Though my clear eye is very weak, I direct it against the keenness of knowledge. He is joyful with swift movement when a mouse sticks in his sharp paw. I too am joyful when I understand a dearly loved, difficult problem. That we be thus at any time, neither of us hinders the other. Each of us likes his craft, severally rejoicing in them. He it is who is master for himself of the work which he does every day. I can perform my own work directed at understanding clearly what is difficult. The scribe in the woods. A hedge of trees overlooks me. Blackbirds lay singing to me, an announcement which I shall not conceal. Above my lined book, the birds chanting sings to me. A clear-voiced cuckoo sings to me, goodly utterance, in a grey cloak from bush fortresses. The Lord is indeed good to me. Well do I write beneath a forest of woodland. The Lord of creation. Let us adore the Lord maker of wondrous works, great bright heaven with its angels, with the white-waved sea on earth. My hand is weary with writing. My hand is weary with writing. My sharp, great point is not thick. My slender beaked pen jets forth a beetle-hued draught of bright blue ink. A steady stream of wisdom springs from my well-colored, neat, fair hand. On the page it pours its draught of ink, of the green-skinned holly. I send my little dripping pen unceasingly over the assemblage of books, great beauty, to enrich the possessions of men of art, whence my hand is weary with writing. And that is it for episode 13 of Wicked Shizuku's Reviews. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please, by all means, come and visit again. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.